Okay, hello everyone. This is Kate Alder again from Irvine Valley College. I'm here today to kind of be the technical support for this fun and exciting webinar being brought to us through Dr. Kate Brooks as a guest of the California Career Cafe. So as we've done in the past with these webinars, what we're going to do is keep all of your microphones muted while Kate's talking or throughout the webinar. And I'm going to ask that you use either the questions or the chat area in the GoToWebinar screen on your page, on your computer, to send any questions you may have. If you have a technical question, I will respond to you as quickly as possible individually. If you have a question for Kate Brooks, I'll be holding on to those questions, and at the end of Kate's presentation, I'll be asking her everyone's questions. So if you have a question, please put it in the questions or the chat box, and I'll be monitoring those throughout the session. And at the end of Kate's presentation, she'll be fielding all those questions and hopefully coming up with some great answers for all of you. Also, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. So if you come in late or you have to leave early or you want to share it at another time with some of your colleagues, you'll be able to do so from the CA Career Briefs website. And we'll be sending you that link as soon as the recording is posted to the website. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rita Jones so that she can take a minute and say hello. Rita, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. Today is the last in this series of the webinars that we're able to offer this January. And this one, the topic is working with creative students, supporting dreams and testing reality. And I'm particularly looking forward to this one. Kate promises to introduce us to a coaching system that will help your students clarify their plans, structure their plans, and encourage their creativity within a practical framework. And I think Kate is the perfect person to be the presenter for this topic. She heads the Career Center at the University of Texas, specifically for the liberal arts students, and is currently teaching a course for entrepreneurs. I know most of you on the call know her by now, and that's why so many of you are on the call today. So I'm going to turn it over to her, but I first want to make sure that I thank the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, who provides the funding so we can bring you particular trainings like today. So welcome, Kate. I'll turn it over to you.
Kate Brooks, are you there? I just tried to unmute her, and it looks like Kate's still, well, we've got Kate. We're seeing your screen. I believe you need to enter your audio pin, which should have just been sent to you.
There's, I see her
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
Folks, hang on for a moment. Kate's with us. We see that she's working her PowerPoint. We just need her to dial in with her audio pin. And I think, Kate, there you are.
Am I there?
You're there now, yes.
I'm here? Okay. I was going to say, you must have done something magic. It suddenly said unmuted. Okay, so you can see my screen all right now.
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
All right, so I will, I just need to make one adjustment here, and then I will go ahead. All righty, so the program today is about working with creative clients, and as we said, supporting their dreams while testing reality. And I know that some of you may or may not feel that you work with that many creative types, particularly if your school doesn't have a specific program for them. But I guarantee you they're out there. There are a lot of students who end up going to college because that's what their parents want them to do, and they would really much rather be in a different field or in a creative field. And so I encourage you to think about this possibly as a resource for a workshop or a program, because you might just be surprised. And when I talk about creative clients, I do mean sort of a broad spectrum. I'm going to focus today on sort of the classic creative careers of like writing and music and art and things like that. But this does not mean, I mean, it also includes things like advertising and architecture and marketing, and careers like that can easily benefit, I think, from the information that you're going to get today. So let's get started. And I will start if my computer will work. Here we go. All right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the components of the creative career search. And these are just some things to keep in mind when someone is trying to find a creative career. obviously there's potential for huge success, and that's what people focus on, particularly young folks, as they're thinking about that career. They think of who they see on television or who they hear on a CD or whatever, and they assume that they too are destined for huge success. But as we all know, that is definitely not guaranteed. This is, by the way, sort of the Debbie Downer part of my program. It will get a little happier as we go along. But the statistics are kind of grim for the creative fields, and I'm going to present some of those in a little bit. There's also the consideration of who decides if they have the talent to move forward in these various fields or not. And I want to go into that in a little more detail. And then something that I think is very important to consider is that very often creativity and artistic expression is really about self-expression. I remember when I was in my master's program, I took a course in assessment from a psychologist who was very good at analyzing what was then called the Strong Campbell. It's now the Strong Vocational Battery. And he used to say that it would confuse counselors and others when creativity or the artistic of the RIASEC model would show up on somebody's profile if they weren't all that artistic, if they didn't see themselves as an artist, a writer, a performer. But what it was a need to express themselves through their career. And they want to be recognized in some way, applauded, so to speak. And they also usually have a desire to create a body of work. So that's an important factor to keep in mind, particularly if you find that the individual you're working with doesn't end up pursuing that specific career but looks at alternative careers. They're probably still always going to have that need for self-expression. Also, letting them know that they're going to have a unique job search, that it is probably not going to be the same type of job search that they would do if they were going to become an accountant. It will be a different type of approach. There will still be some of the basics, but it will be different. But surprisingly, they really need structure and planning and goal setting, because many of them have these creative ambitions, but it's nebulous. It isn't clear how you get from point A to point B. So as a result, you being able to help them set up some structure and planning and goal setting is very important. So again, continuing my Debbie Downer part of the program, these are some fatal flaws that can do in a creative career. They can do in a lot of other careers too, but I think that creative folks are particularly susceptible to some of these. The first is procrastination. It's that I want to do this, but I'm afraid to put my toe in the water. I work with a lot of students who want to become writers, and they know that because I've published a book, they'll come and talk to me about it. And the first thing I'll say is, well, what have you written? And that's when they look at me, and they go, well, nothing yet. Well, they're procrastinating on it because they haven't figured out exactly what they want to write, or they don't know how to, or whatever. And so that's an important hurdle to get past. Another hurdle is the personality that goes all out. People who are into creative endeavors tend to be passionate. And what that means is they can sometimes overdo and stress themselves out and burn the candle at both ends. You get someone who's a writer and they go on a writing jag and suddenly 3 days have passed and they haven't slept, or any other kind of creative passion. They just go all out, and so it can really wear on them. Money problems are another thing for creative types. Money often comes in sort of, it's feast or famine. They'll have periods where there's no money coming in, and then a lot will come in. And they don't always know, of course, if more money will be following. So some people are very good about rationing that money out, and others just spend it the minute it's there. And it's not unusual to hear artistic types having trouble with taxes because they spend the money. They don't necessarily think about the fact that they're going to have to pay taxes on it at some point. Egos are another issue. You need a strong ego, and it's partly that ego that has that desire for self-expression, but at the same time, that can be something that can hurt someone's career if they can't control the ego and they can't keep good relationships with other people. Addictions, probably not a week goes by that we don't see a tabloid report or a news report about another person in the performing industry who has gone into rehab or is having difficulty with addictions, and that again unfortunately does go along with creative mindset. It is not unusual. You don't have to be addicted to be a creative person, and that's actually something people struggle with. There are those who think that they have to drink to be a writer, or they have to because that's what Hemingway did or whatever. No, you don't. But again, that personality is sometimes drawn to that. Also, a lack of focus and discipline. You know, that can happen also in the creative industry. And then finally, a lack of self-awareness, knowing where their talent is and focusing and pointing towards that talent and not allowing that ego to take over and say, well, if I can do this, I can do this other thing. But knowing, you know, what they can and can't do. So just the final, sort of the final part of the Debbie Downer will be the statistics portion. And I didn't want to bore you with a lot of stats, but I did want to mention that, you know, I did check the Department of Labor, and basically what they noted was that as the recession has deepened, unemployment among artists has soared. It's generally double that of other occupations. In this particular recession, architects and designers have been tremendously affected, and that makes sense when you consider that part of the effect of this recession is that we're not doing much new construction. In terms of unemployment rate among actors, that's the highest for all artistic occupations. According to the Screen Actors Guild, 85% unemployment rate. And they said that the 15% who are employed, the bulk of those are as extras or very small parts. They are not by any means lead roles in movies. The average actor's salary is $17.44 an hour. And this I thought was interesting. This is the Department of Labor. They said in 2009, 1 in 5 dancers were unemployed. I think that's interesting because I actually think that's pretty good. But again, the problem, as we all know, is how do they define employed? So it could be they're employed, but it might be not the kind of dancing they want to do, or it could be in a related field. So,
Excuse me, Kate?
Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yes.
I've gotten some feedback, and I'm hearing it too, so I'm not quite sure where your microphone is or how you're holding it, but
Okay.
but it seems like it might be moving in relation to
Oh, okay,
your
I'm
voice,
sorry.
because you're kind of
Let's try it,
fading in and
okay.
out and then getting a little too close. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
not a
we'll
problem.
see if this
Thanks.
works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. So I'll try to keep this phone more still. Okay, so who decides? Who gets to decide if the individuals have the talent to succeed? Well, let's take a look here. Nia Vardalos. I thought this was really interesting. She was told by her agent when her agent fired her that you're not fat enough to be a character actress, you're not pretty enough to be a leading lady, plus there are no Greek roles, so I can no longer represent you. And this was just before she obtained a role in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. And even after that, Disney ran a number of short-lived businesses that did not work at all. Jerry Seinfeld said that the first time he tried to do comedy, he walked out on stage at a comedy club, totally froze, and they booed him off the stage. But to his credit, and again speaking to the strong ego, he said he knew he could do it, and the next night he went out and he did it, and it was absolutely fine. So again, this was he did not allow himself to defeat himself. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first job as a television reporter, and she was told that she wasn't right for television. Harrison Ford, when he was making his first film, was told by studio executives that he should find another career because he didn't have what it takes to succeed in the movie business. Sharon Stone was told by her college career counselor that her plan to be an actress was unrealistic and she would never make it in Hollywood. The counselor recommended that she seek a more appropriate career. And Michael Weatherly, who's the star on the #1 rated show on television, NCIS, he actually comes from a very wealthy New England family. He's part of the Swiss Army knife fortune. However, when he told his family in college that he had decided to become an actor, he was disowned by his father and cut off from all the family funds. He went out to Hollywood with no money at all. So who does decide? Well, there's a lot of people, as you can see, that can have an influence on that or not. But first and foremost, when you're working with these students, the client gets to decide. The student is the one who decides. I never tell a student about my opinion of their talent. They will sometimes bring writing samples to me and will say, do you think I have the talent? Well, I will never answer that because I don't consider myself a talent agent. I'm not an expert on that sort of thing. But the bottom line is they have to decide, and the industry is going to decide as well, because it isn't just about talent. It's a lot about luck. It's a lot about just the right place at the right time. There are so many factors that become involved that just because someone has talent is not a guarantee that they're going to be able to move forward in the creative industry. I generally recommend that they get a panel together of people, that they find at least 3 people that they can get advice from. And the metaphor I use is the original American Idol panel. The original group, not the latest folks who are showing up on American Idol. But I recommend they find somebody like Randy who has industry experience and knows, is a businessman, knows what's going on out there in the industry, but also has the musical talent to know who does well. They get somebody like Paula who will support them and motivate them, and even if their audition doesn't go well, she'll tell them how they look good, and so they have that person who supports. And then you need somebody like Simon who's going to tell you the truth, and it'll be pretty unvarnished. You really need that before you go into an artistic field. Again, you don't have to take the advice, but I think it's good to have it, so at least you're getting hopefully consistent feedback. Also, conversations with family are going to affect anyone else that's affected by their decision to go into an artistic field. Those folks sometimes get a say in this, and that's actually the group that I suspect you might have a lot of at your colleges, because as I mentioned earlier, quite often when a student expresses an interest in a creative career that's a little more risky, that doesn't carry the guarantee the way a more traditional career might, they might be at your school to please their families. So again, that's just a factor in this whole process. So let's talk a little bit about the creative career search and how it goes. And this is for any kind of creative career. As I said, it's not just writers and photographers and artists and dancers and all that, but it actually could include advertising, public relations, other fields where there's a creative element, because talent is always the primary factor in that. So the model that I like to use, the coaching model that I think is really good, is the appreciative coaching model. And some of you may already be familiar with that if you took the training that we offered about a year or so ago in this. But the parts of the appreciative coaching model that I think are particularly applicable here is what they call the 4 Ds, the stages that you help the clients work their way through. The first stage is discover. The second stage is the dream. The third stage is designing, and the fourth stage is the destiny. And so that discover, the little picture I have there is of sort of some jewels, and the idea is the whole point of that discovery phase is finding out where the jewels are. Where is that person really excelling? And that second stage where you see that picture with sort of the vision there in the center, that's what the dream is all about. What is the vision? What's the career they want? And then the third stage, the design, is can we build the scaffolding? How do we get people to that stage? And then the fourth is the destiny. It's it's the roll of the dice to a certain extent, but where do they end up? So let's look at this in a little more detail. During the discovery phase, this is the time to find out who are they and what are their talents. And how does their personality affect their talent? You know, that list that I gave you a little earlier about sort of seven things to the fatal flaws to watch out for. You know, do you see some signs of that? Is that something that maybe needs to be talked about? This is a chance to find out also what feedback have they already received? What have they heard about their talent so far? Has anybody, have they received any kind of feedback? Have they done any performances? Have they written anything? Have they, again, papers? Have they gotten A's on papers? That might be a sign that their writing's good, at least for academic writing. And then it's just a matter of finding out if it's good in other areas. And what have they accomplished so far? Have they actually done anything yet? Have they been in a play? Have they performed on stage? Where are they? What other careers have they considered? Have they thought about a secondary career, something else they might do instead if they don't get the dream career? And then also, what's important to them about this creative career? Why are they pursuing it? What's the why behind it? And you can actually get to that, I think, through the next question of, do they have any mentors or people they admire? So if somebody says, I want to be an actress, and you ask them, well, who is your mentor? Who do you admire? And they say someone like Meryl Streep, that gives you an idea of what they think of as an actress. If they name Kim Kardashian, well, that's a very different kind of person. You know, that's a different career, it's a different thing, and it will tell you what sorts of things are motivating them. You know, what is it about it that appeals? And then finally, who believes in them? Who is supporting them? Who is the person that's got their back and says, this is a good thing to do? Or, you know, you may find out that they don't have anybody supporting them, and that's important to know too. The next stage is the dream, and that's where you help them flesh out just what is the dream. What is the plan? What would be the ideal career in this field, whatever it is? And again, do they have a secondary career? And you might want to flesh that out a little bit too. But what steps have they already taken to move towards this dream? And a nice thing to do in this stage, because they are creative people, is can you help them create sort of a wish list or a plan for, or you know, their ideas of their dream through creating a vision board or some sort of mapping. And those of you who have taken some of the other seminars that are, and they're available online, I believe, if you haven't, on vision boards and how to do maps and things, I'd recommend you do that, because these clients are creative folks. They're probably going to be really bored if you put a lot of lists up there and just words and all that. Getting them to do things in creative kinds of elements is very good. You also might want to have them in this phase choose some sort of a motto or an intention that they're going to do. So it might be as simple as, I will focus on my writing this year. That's part of starting to create the dream. I'm going to just focus on the writing and see what develops. The next stage is the design phase, and this again is where you want to be as creative as you can, because once again, if you just give them a list or an outline, here are the 10 steps you need to do to find a job, you're going to find that they'll disappear on you. So getting them to set goals in a more creative way, and that might be once again through a vision map, or it might be through a SWOT analysis, and I'll go through that quickly here in a minute. But the idea is to let them know that goal setting is actually a great way to have synchronicity. It's a great way to have things just happen. If you set some goals, it makes you more motivated, you have focus, and you're more likely to think about the future and do things that will lead to a good future. Without goals, that's when you kind of wander a little aimlessly in the lack of direction, and you might find that you don't even tap your talents. And it can also lead to a sense of powerlessness, of there's nothing I can do. I have to wait for someone to find my talent. Well, no, they really don't. And if they set some goals, there are ways to get your talent in front of people. So they need to identify roadblocks, both internal and external, and that's where a SWOT analysis comes in really handy. And I've taught this before in previous webinars, but I thought I would just briefly mention it. The SWOT analysis is great for somebody planning a creative career, because you can start with what are their strengths. If they say they want to be a dancer, you know, what different types of dancing have they studied? Do they only know ballet, or have they studied sort of hip-hop? Have they studied tap? Have they studied modern dance? You know, what are their strengths? What are they good with? And then where are the weaknesses? You know, what are the issues that maybe they aren't as prepared for with that career? And the reason I have that arrow going over there is you want to try to turn the weaknesses into strengths, either by getting more training or some sort of class or whatever to develop an area that's underdeveloped, or in just some other way learning what needs to be learned so that that weakness gets turned into a strength. Then they want to look at opportunities, and opportunities are outside of themselves, but the opportunities are things like who hires dancers, who hires writers, where does a graphic artist go for a job? That's the things they want to look at, and when they find those opportunities, once again, you see the arrow going up into strengths, they want to find the opportunities that fit their strengths. They want to find the places and the places to work that play to their personality and to their skills. And then threats are those things they can't control, like the economy, like an 85% unemployment rate in the field of acting. But again, how can they possibly maybe shift some of those threats into opportunities? And that might be a matter of finding out if they, let's say they live in a small town and the threat is there's no place to put on a play. Well, maybe that's an opportunity then. They need to see if they can go to the local high school and volunteer and offer to lead a drama club, or, you know, there's just a lot of different ways that a threat can be turned into an opportunity. But that's a creative process, and I think, you know, if you put a design like that up, I think you'll find that that's more fun for creative types than just making a list of what they might do next. And the more you can get them to fill this out, you're not filling it out for them. If there's places they can't answer, well, that's a place for research. It's time to learn a little bit more and do more on that. So then, more about design. They need, designing their career, they need to develop tools for self-promotion. And so that's probably going to be a portfolio of some sort, likely to be online, regardless of what their medium is, whether they're an artist, a writer, or whatever. Online is still the best place to have that portfolio. They can use Pinterest. They can do a LinkedIn account, of course. They can have a YouTube account. We talked at a previous program on social media, so again, I won't go into that, but taking full advantage of social media to get their name out there and to create the brand and to have themselves known by people in the field becomes very important. The next step is really something we do with all students, get them to research the career field. Who are the key players? Who has the power to hire? And how do you reach those individuals? There are many people who got their start in the mail room or as a receptionist at NBC Studios, things like that, because they were able to reach people with power through that. If you're the person that was taking the main phone calls and you're passing them on to various executives, you get to know who those executives are. You get to know who the talent people are, and so on. And then networking is so important in the artistic field. So helping them develop a networking plan of how they're going to connect with people, how they're going to move forward. And preparing for interviews, now again, you might do that with students who are in any job search, but their interview might be taking the form of an audition or some sort of an elevator pitch, some kind of a demonstration or so on. So this is where, again, they're going to need a slightly different creative approach to the process of finding the job. And then things like query letters. If they want to go into writing, they're going to need to learn how to query an agent or a publisher with whatever their writing designs are. So it's a matter of finding out how to do that and perhaps running a session on that. I recently ran a session at my local library on how to write query letters, and it was for anybody in the community who wanted to be a writer. And that turned out to be a really enjoyable activity, and it was a lot of fun to talk to them about what they had already done, and the bulk of them were at that fear stage where they just were afraid, you know, to even write the query because they were afraid it might not get accepted. And so we spent a lot of time at that session, even though it was supposed to be on how to write a query. Most of it I spent on dealing with rejection and how to handle that and how to get over it. And so that's another thing that I like about working with creative types, because chances are you'll go in and you'll have a plan for what you're going to tell them or what you want to do, and then you'll find out that, well, not so much. They're going to take you down another path because of their questions. So just sort of be prepared for that. So then once you've sort of helped them with the designing of the career, well, now we move into destiny. And for many of them, they're going to wait for the ship to come in. And so, you know, it's just success seldom happens overnight. And even when someone appears to have an overnight success, the truth is there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that went on there. And so talking to them about what can you do while you're pursuing your craft. You know, for some people, they're going to just have to do Starbucks kinds of jobs because they need to be they need to be flexible. They can't have a full-blown career. But others may actually be able to pursue a career. There's a bumper sticker here in Austin, of course, where we have a lot of musicians, and the bumper sticker says, "Real musicians have day jobs." And the idea is, most musicians really only need to play at night. That's when the venues are open, and it's actually kind of late at night. So there is no reason that they can't pursue a 9-to-5 job during the day. And so the idea that it's good to have a backup plan. It's good to have other skills. And at the same time, though, don't put your creativity on hold. Even if you have to get a 9-to-5 job or you're doing something that maybe isn't totally related, reserve time, evenings, weekends, whenever you can, to practice the craft, because you're always building skills. You're always getting your name out there. You can have a website. There's lots of ways to continue promoting your creative career, whatever that might be, while you continue working at a regular job. And then, assuming they get the creative job they're hoping for, is it what they hoped it would be? Often sometimes the worst thing can be to have a dream come true. You can quickly find out that it's not at all what you thought it was going to be. I have worked with students who became assistants to celebrities, for example, and they thought it was going to be just a fascinating thing to be the personal assistant to a star. And they very quickly learned that it was pretty much not fascinating, and that after a few days they realized that it was not what they thought it was going to be. And in here I want to mention that one of the best books in the field, I think, is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. For anybody that wants a creative career or just wants to be more creative, The Artist's Way is a classic, and it's a wonderful book. And she talks a lot about what she calls a career as a shadow artist. And when she talks about that, what she's referring to are people who really wanted to be in an artistic career, but either their family discouraged it, somebody discouraged it, and they chose not to. And so they pick careers that are sort of close by an artistic person, but they're not the one doing the work. So they might be a talent scout, or they might become a publisher instead of a writer, or they might become a celebrity assistant rather than the celebrity. And that's something to look at. Sometimes those shadow careers are perfect. They're actually good because maybe the person just doesn't have the talent or the temperament or whatever they need to be the star. But on the other hand, if it's representing the fact that they are perhaps not really pursuing what they want, then that can be a problem. So this is the time when destiny comes along. They've graduated, or they've moved in and they've just moved on with their career. They've decided to pursue it. They're either probably waiting for it to start, or they've landed something. And so in either case, there's work to be done. There's a place to reassess. And the thing that's really important to keep in mind is there is no such thing as overnight success. And that's something that students need to be told, that they may not realize that. And I have some examples here that's from a very good book called Career Management for the Creative Person. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about recommended resources and things that you can look at. But for instance, Ted Danson of Cheers and CSI fame, he started performing, one of his jobs was as a box of lemon chiffon pie in a commercial. Brad Pitt, whom we all know, wore a chicken suit in a Polo Loco commercial. Chris Rock, comedian, worked as an orderly in a mental hospital. Ellen DeGeneres sold vacuum cleaners and also worked as a legal secretary. So part of the the idea of the artistic career is recognizing that it is definitely not a linear path. It is not a career that you're going to follow any particular pattern. In fact, quite the opposite. You'll probably go up and down, and there will be periods when the employment is great, and there'll be periods when it's not so great. And so once again, as I was saying at the beginning with the 7 fatal flaws, they really have to think about their emotional makeup, and do they have the mental and the emotional capacity to pursue a creative career, because their egos will get bruised, and they will have to hear criticism a lot. Even careers that are not as glamorous, let's say, as acting. I know individuals who work as web designers and graphic designers, and they're very creative, and they come up with this beautiful web design only to have the client say, no, that's not what I had in mind. And you've got to have a thick skin. You have to learn to develop that. So this is, these are just, I think, great examples to show that these folks obviously persevered. They did not stop. Chris Rock clearly did not stop at that orderly job and say, well, that's all I'm going to do. That's pretty much the limit of my career. Clearly, he moved on, as do many of them. So I wanted to mention resources because this is actually a place I want to take a little bit of time and talk to you about some different resources. The first thing I recommend is there's a book by Eric Maisel called Coaching the Artist Within. This is very nice. It's a career coaching guide, but it's not your typical career coaching system. Rather, he's a psychologist, and he focuses a lot on the personality traits of artists and where they are likely to face challenges. So it's everything from what I was talking about earlier, from procrastination to fear to anxiety to depression. Because he's a psychologist, in addition to being a coach, he's very sensitive to the moods and to the challenges, the emotional challenges of being an artist. Because it's not enough that you have to deal with rejection, that you have to be told to your face that you're not wanted at an audition and things like that. Many of people who are creative types have it's not unusual to have a lot of individuals with bipolar personality issues in the artist population. So they're dealing with their own emotional issues at the same time they're dealing with a very punishing kind of profession. So Eric Maisel has a very nice coaching system that he applies that's just focusing very much on their emotions and how they're managing their emotions as they go through the process. Then I mentioned the Artist Way. The Artist Way is a 12-week program. Each week covers a different topic that is sort of important to someone who's trying to become creative. Julia Cameron's work is very much with what she calls blocked creatives, people who would otherwise be pursuing creative types of activities and careers, but for whatever reasons they have blocked themselves out of it, and they've chosen not to pursue it. So her work is on breaking down those barriers to get you to be more creative. And she has some very specific activities that she has you do. She's very disciplined about this. And one of them is, she calls it the morning pages, where every morning while you're doing the Artist Way program, which as I said is a 12-week program, you write 3 pages of, well, she likes handwritten, but she's now in later editions of the book, she's sort of conceded that some of us do like computers. Originally she said no computers, but she's gone back on that. But you do 3 pages of free writing, and it doesn't matter what it is. It can be, today I have this stuff to do, or I can't believe I'm wasting my time writing this. It doesn't matter what you write because you're not going to reread it. She encourages you to, once you write it, just put it away. Don't look at it till the next day when you write your next 3 pages. And the idea is she believes that by doing that discipline of writing every morning, you get all the junk out of your brain. It's your chance to dump everything out of your brain that's blocking you, that's annoying you, that's causing any issues for you, and then the rest of the day you're free to be much more creative. She also has you do what she calls an artist date, and that's an hour a week that you set aside with just yourself to go do something you would enjoy. So it could be anything from going to a bookstore. If you haven't gone to a bookstore in a little while, you can go to a zoo. You can do all sorts of things. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be specifically artistic, but it's recognizing the creative person in you who needs alone time and needs to be able to develop their creative skills. And then in addition, she also has you do daily walks. She's very big on taking a walk because it's important to be in nature. So that's sort of the basics of the Artist Way program, but it's just an absolutely excellent book. And if you look around, you might even find Artist Way workshops in your area because sometimes libraries and other places will run an Artist Way workshop, and it's usually a 12-week program. It's great. And then the book Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield. I think I mentioned this in a previous program, but this is a great book for motivation. It's only about $5. You can get it on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. The author is a screenplay writer, and he wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, which is a movie that came out a few years ago. Basically, this is just a kick you in the rear kind of book to get you to move forward on whatever project it is, no matter what type of, whether it's creative or not. But he says that, you know, the minute you have a good creative project, the first thing that happens is resistance kicks up. And so this is all about getting past that resistance. And then finally, the last book I want to recommend, I've actually used in this program a couple times, is this Career Management for the Creative Person by Lee Silber. This is another really good book that covers the psychological aspects of the creative career, and it just can't be said enough that that's such an important part of a creative career, because artists are emotional. That's what art is about, is expressing emotions. And so they tend to be feeling types, and of all types to go into a career where they're going to get slammed down a lot. So this book, again, also focuses on the importance of managing the career and managing your emotions. And the author uses sort of what he calls a right brain approach to this. So it's creative and it's interesting, and at the same time very practical and pushing goal setting and all of that. So on that note, I think I'm going to finish up here and just thank you. For those of you who've been to all of them, thank you so much. That's terrific. And if you haven't and you have some topics that interest you, I hope you'll listen to the ones that are already recorded. And I think I'll turn it over to Kate, to see the other Kate, to see if anybody has any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kate. That was really interesting. And I actually spent a good part of my life with a couple of creative people. So a lot of what you were saying was ringing true for me. I don't see any questions being posted right now. So I'm going to real quickly here kind of unmute Rita and Susan to see if they want to add any comments or have any questions for you in particular. Rita, Susan, are you there?
Yeah, this is Rita. That was great, Kate. How do you, one question I do have, because in working with workplace skills and getting our students ready for the workplace, we're really finding a huge emphasis on helping students be more creative in general, that's you know, the whole innovation piece. And I understand what you've been talking about is very specifically just for your creative, you know, careers type of thing. But how would you support through our process just innovation and more general, maybe for a business kind of person or for someone else? Any thoughts at all about that?
Yeah, you know, I think that's where I go back to some of those visual techniques that I use and things like the SWOT analysis that are a little outside the box, that are just sort of different. And getting students to do that sort of thing, you have to cajole them sometimes. And you have to say, look, I know this isn't how you would normally do this, or you might feel better if I just let you make a list, but let's just try this. I think it's also kind of fun to get students to try to get them to combine two things that they don't think have any connection and see if they can figure out the connections. In the same way that with career coaches, one of the training tips I like to do is I like to say, what's your hobby? And then whatever they tell me their hobby is, I'll say, well, how would you apply that hobby to helping somebody find a career? So how is running a marathon the same as finding a job? And so, you know, it takes a few minutes to sort of think that through, but usually people come up, oh, well, you know, you have to train, you have to prepare, you can't just run a marathon the first day, you have to do certain steps in between, and so on. And that is exactly like the job search. So I would do that with students. I would ask them, tell me what's a hobby, what do you enjoy? And then I would have them, and I would say, well, how is that like finding a job? And of course they will look at you like you're crazy, but you know, helping them walk through that of how might that be valuable in your job search. So that's just one way. I think, you know, getting them to relate to maybe TV and movies they've seen, things like that. I use examples from TV and movies in my workshops and stuff. That can be another way. But yeah, teaching creativity as a whole, that would be an entire course. That would be a wonderful thing.
You know, and I do, you know, now that you're mentioning a couple of those things, the webinar series that we did last year on visual techniques has a lot of creative ideas in it. So I will mention that to everyone, and in just a minute I'm going to talk about where all that's housed. So that would be a good one to go back and review for all of us.
Kate, we do have a question from one of our participants. Letitia wants to know are the creative students aware from an early age of their creativity?
That's an excellent question. You know, I guess my immediate answer is the successful ones are. You know, the Oprah Winfreys, the people. Oprah talks about the fact that I think she learned to read when she was 3 years old. And she had a pretty rough life. You know, she had just some pretty horrible things happen to her. And yet she kept going, and she didn't allow anybody to say no to her. And I suspect she had that drive inside her, and she knew she was talented. And I do think sometimes you have people that just know they have a gift, and they've been doing it their whole life, and they're just waiting for the world to figure that out. But then I also think, you know, you can have people, and this is where that shadow artist career comes in. You can have people who their early creative ambitions got stomped on and they didn't rise. You know, they weren't able to get past that. And so now they kind of find creative outlets in secondary ways. So that's an excellent question. And it's fascinating.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think I'm going to take the screen back over, and I know that Rita had a couple of closing comments, so let me just see if I can get this going back here. So, Kate, I want to thank you for your time, and Rita, did you want to make a couple of comments?
Yes, I'm showing that I'm supposed to show my screen, but you don't want me to, correct?
Sorry, that's correct. I'm supposed to be having it show my screen, aren't I?
I hope so.
So let me change it.
See my screen.
Okay, so let me change it back to myself and show my screen. So
okay, there we go. All right. I just had a couple of really actually important announcements for the end here. So I, again, along with Kate and Susan, thank all of you for attending. It's been a delightful series for us. Make sure that you realize that there's archives of all the webinars on the cacareerbriefs.com under the Career Development Advisory Committee. And also what I had just mentioned about that series on visual techniques was very good. And if you haven't seen that, you can access that in the same spot. Now, while you're on cacareerbriefs.com, you might want to go to the Workplace Skills section because there's a lesson there called Create. And there's a link that I really liked. It's a survey of 1,500 CEOs, and this was done in 2010. And they identified creativity as the #1 leadership competency of the future. So I think you'll enjoy reading about that. I learned a lot. Creative thinkers are going to be very much in high demand in the future. So you'll get a little more background, I think, for a workshop or whatever it is that you're offering around that topic. And then the other resources, obviously, the Ning Network, that's where we really house many of our resources. If you want any of the graphics for the Career Cafe or just to be able to stay in touch with your region, that's where you would go to do that, and you can see that website there. And then, Kate, if you'll show that last slide, I want to tell all of you, most of you don't know about this yet because the save the dates are just going out really pretty much as we speak. But we're going to have this spring the opportunity to hear Sonia Ortiz Mercado, who is our Dean in the Chancellor's Office for Student Services. Basically, she's the one in the Chancellor's Office that oversees all of the areas of expertise that we're involved in. And she's going to share with us her take on the Student Success Act and how it's going to impact us personally in our jobs. Within the counseling arena or the career services arena. So it'll be a really good one. The one in Northern California on April 12th is at Folsom Lake College. That one will be videotaped, and there'll be an archive of that if you're not able to attend that particular session up there in Sacramento. For the Southern California people on April 18th. There's going to be one at Chaffey College in the Chino Community Center, and Sonia will be there in person for both of those particular workshops. So you can check the Ning. You should also be getting a save the date in your email box to let you know about that. So I want to make sure that you had that date on those dates on your calendar. So that's all I have for now. Susan, any last thing that you'd like to mention?
No, just to thank everybody for attending and bring everybody you can to the regional workshops.
Great.
Thanks to Rita and to Kate Alder and Kate Brooks for putting on this really great webinar series.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks all of you for being here, and we will see you in April. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.